Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of the Diary of a CMO. I am always very excited to introduce my guests. I always say that these are people that in some cases, I've had the opportunity to work with. In some other cases, I've admired from afar. And my guest today is one that I've admired from afar. And I'll tell you, and I'm going to tell him on this podcast when he showed up on my radar. And I've been looking forward to this opportunity. Today, I have with me Sydney Mbhele. Did I get that right, Sydney?
You got it right, Sydney Mbhele.
Mbhele. Thank you. Sydney is the Group Chief Marketing and Corporate Affairs Officer at Absa. There's a bunch of questions. Sydney's experience is I don't know. It's amazing. It's amazing, and I'm looking forward to a lot of conversations to be had. Sydney, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and, just to kind of give the audience, for those who are meeting you for the first time, how would you like to introduce yourself by sort of capturing how you have gotten to this point in your personal career and what you currently do?
Okay. It's often quite interesting when you reflect on yourself, because we hardly ever do. Because we get so caught up in the rat race that
absolutely,
that we don't take the time to actually just take a moment to reflect on our journeys. I'm born and brought up in Johannesburg, in Soweto, a place called Soweto, quite famous for a lot of the struggle icons that we have in South Africa, the Nelson Mandelas, the Bishop Desmond Tutu, and many others. And I have sort of lived in most parts of South Africa, not everywhere, but in a number of provinces for different reasons, whether it's schooling or working or, doing, something. So fairly well sort of oriented with South Africa. I've, of course, lived overseas as well. When I was at Unilever, I was a global marketing director based in London. And, I spent a number of years traveling the world and doing a lot of work for Unilever. Then, I'm an avid soccer fan.
Oh, wow.
For my sins, I'm a Manchester United.
Oh, wow.
Manchester United fan, and I love music. I love being around people, and I've recently started golf as well.
Okay.
And so I'm enjoying that. Fairly open-minded human being. Travel a lot. I enjoy exploring the world, and I've got two jolly boys, 18-year-old and the 13-year-old now. My 18-year-old is about to transition into university. My 13-year-old is about to transition into high school, and it's a boarding school where his brother went. So I guess the next few months for me are going to be quite interesting, just managing through that transition. I've worked across categories. I've worked in fast-moving consumer goods, what we call FMCG. I've worked in telecoms for a little bit, a number of years. I think 3 years there. And then I've also over the last since 2010. No, not 2010. Since 2011. So for 13 years. I've now been also in financial services, and I've worked for 3 sort of major organizations that trade across the continent. and I'm currently a group chief marketing and corporate affairs officer for the Absa Group, and I'm enjoying it because the organization is going through a lot of transformation. In its core business in South Africa, we are in 10 other countries, in fact, 18 other countries across the continent, other than South Africa. And we have a number of international corridors. The US, the UK, we launched in China a few months ago, and we're about to go into the Middle East early next year. Even on the continent, we've got some plans for expansion. So it's an organization that's going through a lot of rethinking, recoding,
Right.
what it means to be a Pan-African business. And I'm playing a very big role in defining that, and defining our, what our business should be about, what should be in the veins of our business, and how we show up in the different environments in which we operate. And what does this mean for customers? What does it mean to build a sustainable franchise over time?
Interesting.
Hopefully I've given you a nice snippet.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have, Sydney. Yes, you have. A little bit more than a snippet for sure, but yes, you have. I mean, where do I start? It's so much to talk about. But I think I will start from 13 years in financial services. I think across all of the sectors you have worked, you have spent the most amount of time in financial services. And coming onto this call, I said to myself, I'm going to have to ask Sydney about, first of all, why financial services all of this time? Or is it because you've been to consumer goods, you've been to telecoms, and let's just do financial services. But more exciting for me is to hear from you what you would consider your playbook. Since you have been in this space of, building financial services brand for a minute, what is your playbook? What are those key imperatives or strategic imperatives in that sense that, marketing leaders or brand builders or CMOs need to consider when they are approaching the task of building financial services brand? This is like I call it an elevator masterclass, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, look, I mean, maybe let me start here, because we could do this for a very long time. So let me start here. Let me land maybe two major points to try and answer your question. And those 2 points are not exhaustive. There probably could be many others, but let me land these two. Because they will help us just to kind of ease into the conversation in a strategic manner.
Fantastic.
The first one is about being in a service-oriented business. Any business. It might not be banking. It might not be financial services. It might be telecoms.
Right.
For all I know, any service business, there's got to be 3 things that are congruent at every single time or every single point. 3 things. What we are, what we do, and what we say have to be congruent. Because as brands, we can't promise what we can't deliver. So if we have an organizational purpose or a brand purpose, and we've defined it succinctly, it is important that we are able to deliver that in the most powerful manner possible, because we've made that promise. You see, it's unlike in FMCG, where I may say to you, Red Bull gives you wings. Does it really give you wings? No, it doesn't literally. Essentially, what they're trying to say is use an intrinsic to express an extrinsic for the brand. Whereas in a service environment, you can't say, once a bank in South Africa had a payoff line which was simpler, better, faster. And after a very short space of time, a number of years, they've had to stop that because their systems were not geared to be simpler, better, faster. So the first point I want to land is that as brands, we should be able, particularly in a service environment, to deliver what we promise, which means we can't just choose anything. You can't say we are the most innovative brand if you are not the most innovative.
Got it.
You can't say, we are the most efficient if you're not efficient. So the first thing that I want to land is that if you're in a service environment, which banking or financial services is at, is this notion that you can't deliver, you have to deliver what you promise. So therefore, those three things, what we are, often which is a purpose, what we do, which is customer experience, and what we say, which is often led by marketing. All of those things have to be congruent. I hope that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
The second point, which I think is important if you're in financial services, is to recognize the role that financial services play as a catalyst in the development of humanity, of economies, of families, because a lot of what we do has to do with money. Financial services helps economies to function, help those who have money to protect it, those who don't have money or who have little to grow it. There is such a profound existential question for financial services.
Got it.
So therefore, being always purposeful about how that impact is orchestrated or how it manifests in the environment in which you operate becomes extremely important. So the first one is the congruency about what we promise and about what we deliver. Secondly, is to be authentic about being purposeful because of the incredible and important role that we play in society. I hope that's an elevator pitch.
That definitely is an elevator pitch. It's an elevator masterclass. I can't help but I'm sure you heard this before. I think it's either your voice, the tone, the dramatic pauses. I don't know what it is, but maybe a combination of all of these things mix for a very captivating experience listening to you. I don't know if you've heard that before.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
almost
you. I appreciate it.
it's almost enchanting. Like you literally have to. Oh my goodness, that is so cool.
I take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Please do. Did you always know though? And I like to always ask this question in terms of looking at how far you've come in your professional career. Did you always set out to say, I want to build a career in marketing services or marketing communications or whatever? Like where did this come from? Was this always the dream in that sense?
No, actually not. And I like to say I collided with it.
Oh, wow.
I collided with the discipline. I started my career in sales, and in one of the organizations I was working for, we used to have these marketing guys from the marketing department coming to present to us as sales guys every trimester, I think. to tell us, okay, over the next 4 months, here are the promotions we're going to run. Here's what we are planning to do. And they would come with the marketing director, and the fullness of them would be there and presenting to us. And I was a regional sales manager at the time. And so I used to ask a lot of questions about what they were presenting to us. And sometimes I would say, no, but those mechanics, what if you change them this way? It would be better, actually, rather than the way that you structured it. And then at times, I would send presentations of my own, proposing to the marketing guys what promotions
Oh, wow.
we should have.
Wow.
And when a role became available for a marketing manager role, and I hadn't studied marketing at the time, the marketing director came to me, and Mike Dubé, and he said, I think I've got a job for you. I think you would do well in the job. I said, but I don't have the skills for it. He said, you are a natural, you'll be fine, and we'll help you to study, to gain a little bit of sort of conceptual understanding of marketing, but based on our interaction, we think you can do the job. So that's how I collided with it.
Wow. 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 Interesting. I think I see where the point I was making earlier about, you being captivating when you talk. I guess it might have something to do with your sales background. Maybe. It might have to do with your sales background. I think I could draw a line there somehow.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I was not a bad salesperson, but I don't think so. I think I've grown, I would say maybe the skill of engagement.
Right.
And the skill of leadership. I think I've grown that over time.
Interesting.
There's a lot that's been written about leadership, Tayo, about whether leaders are born or are they made.
Got it.
It's an interesting discussion.
Yes, it is.
Is it a case of nature or is it a case of nurture? It is important to sort of understand that, and I don't know if you are a football fan.
A little bit.
A little bit. I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Ronaldo.
Really, Sydney?
a guy called Messi.
Absolutely.
So if you take Ronaldo and Messi and you put them alongside, these are the guys who've dominated football over the last sort of 10, 15 years. Both have won the Ballon d'Or and they've become the best player of the world many times interchangeably. When you look at those guys, you have Ronaldo, who stays behind after the training session, to practice, to kick some balls, muscled, muscled and goes to gym, and you can see that he works hard. And then you have a guy like Messi, very short, and he does this thing so effortless. Is it a case of nurture or is it a case of nature? Ronaldo, you could say, is nature. Messi, you could say Messi, you could say is nature because he's just so effortless. And right. Ronaldo, you can see, is working very hard. So clearly, you don't always have to be a Messi. You don't always to have been born with it. You can build it. And the same applies to everything in life.
What was it before? Did you set out to say, okay, you know what, I want to build a career in sales, or did you set out to say, like Ntabi, that's the CMO for Middle in Africa, Pernod Ricard, said to me, her dream was to become the first female Black president. So I'm just curious what yours was, Sydney.
I came from a humble background in the context of success. You know, my mother was a nurse, my dad was a clerk, a filing clerk. You know, so I don't come from a family of super successful people. I never got exposed to real success. Actually, I just thought it was inaccessible. I never thought I'll
Mm,
get there. You know,
interesting.
so I just wanted to live a comfortable life.
Wow.
You know, I never had, honestly, I never had big dreams. It's
Mm,
only when I was into, when I started to get into marketing and I started to understand where it could take me that I actually thought one day, hopefully I can be a marketing director.
oh wow.
But
Wow.
growing up, I never had ambitions to be anything of significance other than just to kind of get by in life. You know, hopefully, you know, earn okay, have a house,
Right.
have a car, you know,
Right.
be able to get my kids through school.
Right.
You know, so I had very, very humble aspirations. Let me put it that way.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. I want to kind of speak a bit more about that in terms of growing up and why those kinds of conversations are very fascinating for me because I think it's very important for people to see or hear some of this real stories, this authentic stories. Because it's easy for someone to look at Sydney Mbhele and say to himself, "Ah, man, I mean, he's all right. He had it easy. I mean, come on now, look at his career. I mean, he was from this to Sanlam, from Sanlam to come on now, that kind of thing." So, take us back to, let's say, in our marketing speak, a day in the life of a 15 or 12 or 13-year-old Sydney.
A day in the life of a 13-year-old Sydney was a young boy running around, experiencing life, the exuberance of life, and its maybe lack of limits.
Interesting.
I love Omos. I don't know if they still do that. Omo is a washing powder.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, but I used to like their positioning. Debt is good,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because debt is good. Has just such a deep meaning, particularly for kids growing up. To say debt is good because if you're dirty means you're exploring, you're learning. You are feeling the world, you're pushing the boundaries.
Mm,
And I think the tapestry of my upbringing provided me that, provided this broad sense of diversity of life. Growing up in Johannesburg, in South Africa, we are very diverse, and I'm sure other countries too. Um, but in the same neighborhood, you have Zulu, Sotho, Tswana, Pedi, Venda. You learn to speak multiple languages. It's a really it's a mix, it's a melting pot. So it teaches you so much just being in that circumstance.
wow.
Um, and I think that sort of kind of gave me a great, unlimited. If you go to some of my platforms,
Hmm.
whether it's Instagram or whether it's any of the social platforms, my sort of thematic, or in fact, in many times, my name in those platforms is Life Unlimited, which if
Wow.
it's a payoff line for my own brand, personal brand, is Life Unlimited. It's the ability to never have limits, to push the boundaries, to never say never. And look where I am now. Without being greedy about it, without being, doing it at all costs, doing it because you love it, you want, you really want to, get somewhere as as you learn, as you get exposed, and you reframe your dreams,
Right.
So it's a boy who actually was just living,
Wow.
and I guess that's the beauty of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned obviously just earlier that you were born and raised, if I'm correct, in Soweto, right?
Yes.
Um, I've been to Soweto, I think maybe once or twice. I've been to SA, I've been to Joburg, I've been to Cape Town as well. Actually proposed to my wife in Cape Town
That's
30 some
beautiful.
years some years ago. And I remember this highway, and please, and I like this conversation I'm about to have with you, because one of the ambitions, one of the things we want to do with the podcast is to really, it's like taking Africa to the world in every sense of
Yeah.
the sense of the word.
Yeah.
And I remember taking this highway, and on this, and you had the townships on the, I think, on the
Yes.
right hand side, and then you had more like the city urban sort of whatever on the other side. And I remember, I think I was on one of these peninsula tours, or so, I can't remember, I was one of those tours, and they were talking about it.
Yes.
And I wanted to
Yes.
just, hear from you, for someone who grew up in Soweto and lived, in those realities. Can you just sort of educate me and educate my audience in terms of the significance that Soweto, not to mention, when you mention all of these icons that sort of came out of there. Please talk to us about Soweto.
I mean, it's a place with a lot of history. It's a
Yeah.
place that's given birth to, as I said, so many people across the realm of life, not just politics, music, and the one thing about Soweto, there's just something. There's a poise. There's a confidence about people from Soweto. It's like Nigerians. If I meet Nigerians anywhere in the world, what I love about Nigerians is, and they do it with humility, but
Right.
but there's a poise. Soweto people are like that. There's just something about coming from Soweto which gives you so much pride. I guess
Wow.
because of the history. And
Right.
because of how central Soweto has been, and intertwined in the history of South Africa. And but it's a place with everything. When I was growing up, my dad used to say you can find any car that you can find anywhere in the world in Soweto. At the time, it's supposed to be a township, a sort of kind of bottom of the pyramid to
Right.
sort of the
Right.
middle market, but you could find anything. It's a
Wow.
melting pot. It's everything.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
and I think I mean, when I was growing up, it was the fashionable place to come from. If you go to other parts of South Africa, if you go to KZN, KwaZulu Natal, in Durban, and people would say to you, just can you dance for us, so we see what's the latest. Can you dance for us? We want to see what's the latest thing. So it's the latest. It was a very trend-setting place. The world has changed now. It's become boundaryless, and that has gone a little bit now for those who are growing up in Soweto. But there's just something about coming from Soweto that just gives you, this resilience, that gives you this notion that you can be anything if you want to, and that it's all in your hands.
Right.
People from Soweto are hustlers. They make something out of nothing.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is where you are going.
Wow.
And that's a kind of Soweto ethic. That's a Soweto ethic. It's a buzzing city. In Soweto, you go at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's not quiet. The streets are like busy. On a Monday morning, on a Tuesday morning, it's taxis hooting. It's this. It's people going there. And, so there's just something that is always on.
Right.
There's something that is alive about Soweto.
Wow.
Which I enjoy. And, it's actually, if you're in South Africa, if someone says, where are you from? It's one of the things that's nice to say. I'm from Soweto. Then people go, oh, okay. Of course, it breeds its own sort of enemies, but I mean, sometimes friendly enemies with other townships. but there's just something about being a Sowetan, which is just beautiful and colorful. Let me put it that
Amazing.
way.
Amazing. I love how you speak about it with so much, I literally watched your face lit up the moment you started talking about Soweto. It's incredible. It's incredible when you think about, whether we are going from, from Soweto to Nairobi to Cairo to Lagos to wherever. It's so exciting when you see the people, and I think there's just something about it for Africans in general. This sense of
That's it.
pride,
That's it.
this sense of pride about where we are
That's
from,
it.
and regardless of everything you hear about us, regardless of what your sentiments are about Africans, informed or otherwise, we don't care, to be honest. We are
That's
proud of who
it.
we are, and we will continue to be. So it's really, really
That's
exciting
it.
to talk about it. Before we started, before I hit record, I was saying, okay, actually, after I hit record, I said I was going to talk about when I started to kind of, look into who's this person, and it was the Sanlam Leave with Confidence campaign.
Yes.
Um, and that campaign, I, you know, it was. I mean, we've always seen whether financial services brands or also or different kinds of brands want to sort of associate with football. The consumer goods or the fast-moving consumer goods kind of have it sort of easier to be able to drive a lot more extension by engaging with sports. But for financial services, it really, really was exciting for me to see how that campaign sort of came to life,
Yes. Yes.
in such a beautiful way. I must say that in my short time of being in marketing communications, worked and started a few agencies, that anytime we have a financial services brief, I guarantee you, Sydney, that the Sanlam Live with Confidence case study is going to be on that document.
Wow,
um
that's amazing.
just because when you look across the continent, there's very few and far in between in terms of financial services brands you would find that have nailed consumer or customer engagement at such a deep level, and made it look so effortless. So I see, you see I'm geeking out on this thing just to tell you that I have gone over it for a while. uh
Yes.
so
Yes.
in my mind is I want you to I want to think about Sanlam, the Live with Confidence, and the Olympian case study as well. I watched your interview with I think it was a biz community, I think, yourself and the founders at King James, and it just it was just clear to me, like, there's something this man understands about financial services and building brands that
Yes.
we don't get. But I would I would strip away the financial services sort of box, and then just speaking about brands in general. And now that you are at Absa, I know that you just launched a campaign called Your Story Matters.
Yes.
I'm curious to know where, because I also know that you are now, you've been at Absa now for about less than about 2 3 years, right?
2 2 years. Just yeah,
Yeah,
just
2 years.
almost 2 years. Yes.
Yeah. So in my mind is that when you came in, what did you meet, and why did you see this brand promise or purpose as the way to go for the brand
For Absa.
for Absa? Yes, for Absa.
Yeah. No, I look very fondly. Uh, I look back very fondly at some of the strategic work that I've led. Um, Before Sanlam, there's a bank in South Africa called Nedbank,
Yeah.
and the positioning the payoff line is see money differently. I really take pride in that. I take a lot of pride in live with confidence, and even more pride in your story matters. I guess, firstly, I am against the notion of new broom sweeps clean. You don't go to an environment with preconceived ideas that I'm going to reposition the brand purely because it has to be done.
Right.
It has to be based on it has to be based on a banning platform.
Right.
It has to be based on where the business is going and from a strategy perspective. And you've got to juxtapose and say, is the brand helping to deliver that business strategy? I started this conversation today with the congruence between who we are, what we do, and what we say.
Right.
Marketing is often on the what we say.
Right.
Who we are and what we do is actually at the center of the business strategy.
Right.
Because those things, if you think about them as circles, 3 circles that
Right.
interface in the middle.
Like a Venn diagram.
Exactly. When you get to the middle and there's an smallest, slightest incongruence, then you are not giving the business the best opportunity to achieve what it needs to achieve.
Got it.
So when you come into an environment, you've got to say, what is the strategy? And what is the best way to articulate that strategy externally? And it was clear to me, looking at the strategy and where the brand was at, that there was a very big and strong disconnect. And you got to understand, what motivates the people we seek to be doing business with. What motivates our clients? What is it that's going to make them do business with you versus anybody else? They go through a consideration period where they're identifying who is really best suited to answer my needs. And people are actually very lazy to think. That's why this thing called saliency.
Right.
That's why this thing called awareness, presence is so important in marketing. Because when they connect emotionally with it, you are halfway there. So it was very clear to me when I came in, there was a positioning at Absa which was Africanacity.
Right.
Was the positioning for the brand. It sounds like a very interesting word, very smart, but a bit complicated.
Right.
A bit abstract.
Right.
And if you ask people what it means, Africanacity was more about embracing the continent, but not so much about tangible value that I get as a customer if I'm engaging with Absa. From that positioning, what do I get as a customer? How is it making a difference to me?
Right.
So it was a very big, noble motherhood positioning, but that didn't do anything for the business.
Wow.
So it was important then to go through a journey of understanding what could, and where do we think there's a blue ocean, there's opportunities and gaps in the market, and how do we fill that gap in the most authentic way, being purposeful, which is what I spoke to you about, bringing tangible value to clients, which is what I've been talking to you about, making sure that those 3 circles are connected, are congruent. That's where the velocity is at its most powerful.
Wow.
It's like this thing called Ikigai. I don't know if you've been exposed to it, Eitai.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ikigai is the Japanese philosophy about human beings. That if you'll end up doing something that you are good at, that you love, that's making a difference in the world, etc., etc.
Right.
That you are going to operate at your most optimal.
Mm. Mm.
No doubt.
Mm.
You are going to operate at your most optimal.
Mm.
Likewise, with brands, it is important that those three things are so powerfully connected. So your story matters. When we started to do the work to understand what is it that's really moving people, we got a sense that people don't want what banking has become: inaccessible, complicated, about them, not about the customer. Even if you've been banking with one institution all your life and you've bought a car before, when you buy a house, they still want you to complete reams and reams of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion of human-centeredness, bringing back human-centeredness into banking, is the one that's given birth to these stories. Because when a bank starts to behave in a human way, it has the ability to change society. It has the ability to create stories. And not stories about itself, but stories about those it serves. Stories about communities, stories about small businesses, stories about a young man who is about to go to university and needs support. Stories about a young couple that needs to buy a house. Stories about that woman who's about to give birth. Stories about a big business that has the potential to change the face of the economy.
Right.
Each and every one of us have a story. And that story is unique. And nobody must change your story because it is your story and it matters. When a bank can react to that, partner with you to enable that story, it is the most powerful thing in humanity.
Wow.
So we went back and said, if that is exactly what it is, well, let's start with our purpose. Why do we exist as an organization? So at the beginning of last year, we said, before we go do this brand work and talk about what that brand is going to look like externally, let's start with who we are and what we do. And we reframed our organizational purpose as empowering Africa's tomorrow together, one story at a time. Empowering Africa's tomorrow together, one story at a time.
Right.
And as we did the work on the brand to say, how do we then make sure that those three circles are congruent? We got to a point where our essence became clear to us that our essence should be something like, we see an opportunity in every story. We don't discriminate whether you're big, whether you're small, whether you're a small business or big business, whether you're a poor community or as an institution. If we're going to empower Africa's tomorrow, we have to have the ability to see an opportunity in every story. In your story, no matter how you think about your story,
right,
we must see an opportunity and give you hope.
Right.
So when you come to us and you say you want a loan and you don't qualify, your story still does matter. We don't say no. We journey with you to a yes.
Wow.
That's when you are truly human-centered as a bank. So we then translated, we see an opportunity in every story. to say, what would it mean to people as we talk about it externally? Is to remind them every single day, because we have a responsibility for this humanity on this continent to move forward, to take just one more step. Wherever you find yourself, you just take one more step and things may just light up for you. Lightning could strike. Your story matters.
Sydney, come on, man. Oh boy, yeah, I think you're here giving me goose pimples. What's going on? Oh my days, oh my days. Wow, wow. And I think I've always believed that the brand most of the time is a reflection of the people behind it. To a large extent, not entirely for sure, but to a large extent. And sometimes when I sit with in my little experience, when I sit with marketing directors or marketing teams, I am either it either confirms my my sentiments about the team behind this brand, or I always hope on the flip side that I'm pleasantly surprised. And there is no doubt, with how you embody, because you don't even sound like you are speaking on behalf of the brand. You sound like this is something you actually believe in. Like and I think that I think as consumers, we kind of were able to feel that when we experience the brand. And I think that's really where the magic is. And it takes me to the next conversation I wanted to have with you, which is about when we say marketing is an art and a science. Some people say it's logic or magic. This is the same sort of reference. But for you, when you think about marketing in that sense as an art and a science, where first of all, what is your how do you see that reference, and then where have you found historically in your experience, where have you found the opportunities to really because I always get the feeling like most of the time as brand owners we do one part really well and kind of neglect the other parts. It's almost like when it comes to the art side, in terms of marketing as an art, I feel like that's where as marketers we kind of struggle, because the science is science. We know 1+1 is 2. You put the product here, you put the product there, you put the placement here, you put the placement there. All of that stuff can be literally get done with a checklist. I feel like when it comes to the art of it, which is what you've spoken, need I say, so eloquently of, I think that's where we struggle as marketers. What do you think about that reference of art and a science, and how you see that concept?
The truth is, in life of marketing, and this is where we've lost credibility as a discipline, is in our inability to justify cause and effect. Why am I doing this, and for what purpose? Why am I doing this, and for what purpose? Cause and effect. How I got to your story matters, I've just explained to you. There's an element of science there.
Sure.
Deep science that is about saying, how do we shift? Actually, it is behavioral science.
Absolutely.
Marketing is behavioral science.
Absolutely.
It's about shifting people's perceptions. And you don't shift people's perceptions by shooting in the dark. you got to have the analytical ability to say, I need to go northeast, not north, to be able to make a difference. And it is important to know what are the differences between northeast and north.
Right.
Because if you go north, you go divergent to where you need to go. You're talking about being on a freeway in South Africa. You can end up jumping onto the wrong freeway.
Right.
There's nothing, Tayo, that is more painful than running the wrong race well.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow.
It is painful. Can you imagine developing the best outdoor campaign when, in actual fact, the most effective would have been to do a radio ad?
Right.
There's nothing more painful than running the wrong race well. There's a case study, a diaper brand, and they were not doing well, and they were thinking, what is the best way to regain market share? And someone came with actually a very good idea to say, listen, clearly we have to target moms. Because they are the ones who buy diapers. And everyone said, just fantastic. Absolutely, we have to target moms. And then someone said, okay, so where's the best time to reach these people? Because they are busy. Where's the best time? They debated and they debated until they got to a point that actually the best time to reach this mom is through radio when they're dropping kids off at school. Because the majority of moms,
Right.
or
Right.
at least in South Africa and maybe other parts of the world, they spend a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who take kids to school.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sitting in a boardroom and everyone said, actually, that makes sense. Let's go for it. And they went and bought good weights on radio. We're going to reach these people between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. You had competitions and all sorts of things. And it makes sense. But they had missed one thing. That when those moms are taking kids to school in the morning, they're actually talking to the kids. They are playing games. I spy with my little eye. What do you see outside in the trees? What do you see? And they are not listening to the radio. Even if it's on, but they are not listening to the radio. So you can understand there's an element of science to get through to them, such that you reduce the margin of error. So there's a lot of what we do in marketing, which is science.
Yeah.
The work I've done that I've given you, while it has a creative element, live with confidence, see money differently, your story matters, the foundations of it, for the most part, is science.
Right. Right.
Of course, we are human beings. And what it means when you're a human being is that you've got emotions. You can then bring in emotion to give it the richness.
Right. Right.
Bring the emotion to connect to the heart. But you've dealt with the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So marketing is always about part art, part science.
Got it. Got it.
It is like a difference between the what and the how.
Right.
And if you want to be successful, you have to be not just proficient on both of them. You have to be leading edge on both of them, but blend them. Not look at them in isolation. You got to blend them.
Right.
I've never seen a beautiful ad that is not grounded on a universal insight.
Right. Right.
And if it's going to hit the top chart, the top box, it is often a combination of the two.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sydney. Oh boy, I can't believe we're almost an hour in. Oh man, I still have okay, so I'm gonna narrow down my questions to like this three. The first one is the conversation about CMOs and the rest of the C-suite. Especially, for someone like you who's been in financial services, where everything I imagine is seen through the lens of costs and effect, if you get what I mean. And I had this same conversation with Kenzie, Nedbank group exec for marketing and comms now, and she had her own theory about how she manages that. But I wanted to hear from you as well, because one of the big challenges that marketing leaders deal with is this conversation between marketing and the CMO and the CFO and every other C-suite exec. How do you, as the marketing leader within such a big organization, or how do you advise that marketing leaders manage the conversation at the C-suite level? Because it's almost like in some cases marketing is not seen as relevant in that sense. How would you advise marketing leaders to manage that relationship at that level, horizontally, and also obviously vertically to the chief execs as well?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few things that I could offer as advice.
Right.
Firstly, do not talk to them as if you are talking to marketing people. What is spontaneous awareness?
Sydney.
And do you think your CFO will understand that?
Oh boy.
So instead of saying spontaneous awareness, I'd rather say propensity to buy.
Right.
Instead of saying, guys, our marketing spend is X, I'd rather say our marketing investment is X. Because we are investing for the future here. So firstly, talk to them like you're talking a language that they'll understand. There is nothing that we do in marketing that cannot be told in a manner that a CFO or a CEO can understand. Because in financial services, they are mostly chartered accountants. They've never been in marketing. So don't talk to yourself.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, every presentation must be educational. So every time I present, I have to pretend they don't know what I'm talking about. And I want to talk about mental availability and say you only get mental availability when you have the most optimal combination between supporting brand building and supporting sales activation. It's mental availability. So here's what happens. when you have mental availability and you go put it in a manner that they can understand how it starts off from familiarity to brand value. You know, I am presenting next week and I'm asking for money. I want to show you what my first slide is. So the slide is a bottle of Coca-Cola. And it's half full. And it says at the top, the part that is empty, it's just an illustrative.
Right.
The full bottle, the full bottle is a difference between market cap and net asset value. Market cap is, let's say, 100. And the half-empty bottle, the part that is a drink, that's a net asset value. So if you take the trucks, the buildings, everything that they have, that net asset value. But if you were to be selling that business, you'd be paying 100. But the net asset value is, I don't know, maybe 60 something.
It says 60, yeah.
What is the difference between the two? It's that thing we call intangible. It's that thing we call brand value. In general, brands account for more than 30% of the stock market. 30% of the stock market. That's what they account for.
Right.
The brand part.
Right.
Can you imagine what the CFO, if you start to explain it like
Oh my days, oh my days, oh my days.
Can you imagine if I say to you, if we do this thing well, we will grow our balance sheet by 30% beyond what we own as an organization. And then connect in between how you get there. You got to connect. So I said, firstly, speak the language.
Yeah.
Secondly,
educational.
Always be educational. Don't overdo it. Don't look like you're undermining them. Don't look like you are talking down on them. But always start off and illuminate. Illuminate the mind. They say, wow, I didn't know this. Oh, I didn't realize this. Then you start to go to your meat and say, well, let me show you what we are doing here to get there. Or let me show you where we are on that journey. Let me show you how we've been doing and what are the components that connect them. Number 3 is a clear commercial argument. Not a creative. Don't show pictures. Don't show pictures. I mean, you can. But if you're going to ask for money, you gotta have a clear commercial argument.
Right.
That connects what I've just told you. To why we need this and why should we should do this and why. So I'll probably just leave it at that. But I would say if you just embrace those 3 principles, you are some way to getting that money.
Absolutely. I like that you touched on the conversation regarding brand value. I think the last time I checked, I think it's the reports by Brand Finance for 2023. I know Absa is, I think, number 4 most valuable brand on the continent right now. I'm sure that in the next year or two, we might just be eyeing that number one spot.
We are coming for them.
Oh
We
my
are coming
God,
for them.
Sydney. Oh my God, Sydney. As I start to wind this down, because I have taken quite a bit of your time, I wanted to. You had mentioned that you're a father of two boys, and these are two boys who are, one is going into uni, the other one is going into high school, and I think that one of the things that I value the most personally is time that I am able to spend with my kids. And I am very intentional about it. I think it was yesterday I was talking to my kids. I have three. I have Nathan, and then I have the twin girls, Kayla and Carla. And I was talking to all three of them because we had to switch schools for some other reasons. So I was talking to them about, going to a new school, going to a new grade, and all of that stuff. And as you mentioned your boys, I couldn't help but think to myself, how do you, as a father, um, with the professional life that you have, and as busy as I can imagine it to be, how do you manage that? How do you balance that between your professional, schedule, and then also being a parent?
Mm. It's one of the things I love doing. I've enjoyed doing. Like you, I'm very intentional. I make the time for conversations. I spend a lot of time talking to them.
Wow.
And even when I'm busy, I may not see them, I don't know, 30, 40, 50% of the time in a week.
Right.
And when I have time with them, I'm always counseling. I'm always building, and I'm always hopefully imparting. I hope I've built a relationship with them that makes it easy for them to talk to me about anything. They have turned out well. Remember that conversation about nurture versus nature?
Right.
I always believe that if we put something into it, we can always believe that we've nurtured it.
Right.
I remember listening to an podcast as I was doing my walks in the morning out in the streets and just a little bit of exercise. A couple of years ago, some 8 years ago. And the podcast was about why do some kids turn out well and others don't?
Mm.
I found it a very fascinating
Wow.
podcast.
Wow.
Why do some kids turn out well and others don't? And to cut a long story short, they juxtapose two things. Being authoritarian versus being authoritative.
Mm. 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 Mm.
Authoritarian versus being authoritative. Authoritarian, it's a tell. I'm your parent, listen to me. And it creates a transactional relationship.
Right.
Because you're telling. It is also instructive. Authoritative is when your kids know the difference between love and being firm about when not to cross the line.
Right.
The balance that you are able to strike there, which often in English we call it tough love. It's tough love. If I was on a plane last week, I think I was flying from Durban or Cape Town, I don't remember. And there was this couple. with a young kid, an infant. No, not infant. I don't know whether you call it, what, a 3-4-year-old, 4-year-old. She made the flying so unpleasant for everyone.
Oh, wow.
She was screaming. She didn't want to sit on her own, and on the plane, you're not allowed at that age to be sitting on top of your parent. You got to sit on your own seat. And she was kicking and screaming the whole flight, crying through the roof. They were sitting behind me. God, the scream. You know, I looked at that child and I knew the problem is not the child.
Mm, mm.
The problem is
Wow.
the parents.
Wow. Wow.
They've not been able to be authoritative.
Right.
They give kids too much leeway, even when they are not supposed to a point where it becomes uncontrollable.
Yeah.
You can't hope to enforce discipline in public, in a mall, when you are not doing it at home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
When you are not doing it at home. So there's something about being authoritative that is powerful. But the most powerful thing about it is that kids do not fear you. They know you are doing it with love because they can see the balance you're striking about being there, giving them the best you can, while helping them to have the best, you know. And hopefully maybe I've been able to deploy some of those principles and they've worked for me. And I'm very proud of them. Very, very proud.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Sydney. I mean, I think that this was definitely a very, very interesting conversation for me. It's everything I imagined that it would be, plus more. And whilst I still have a few other questions here, but I think we can pull the curtains on the conversation at this point. I think in closing,
thank you for having me.
I think in closing, you know, do you have any fears? What's your biggest fear? You know, when I think about my life and my journey, my biggest fear
is to
that,
die prematurely.
Wow, that is exactly the same thing. Exactly the same.
It's to die prematurely. I have so much to give to the world. I have so much to give to my kids. I have so much to give to my country, to my family, extended family, you know. And I think if I were to perish, they'd be so devastated. And I hope I can be alive to see some of the fruits as well. So my only fear is death. And it's not so much actually fear for me because I've lived.
Right.
You know, it's fear for them.
Right.
So it's to die prematurely and them not getting the opportunity to experience how great I can be in their lives,
Right.
how great they can be in my life,
Right.
you know, in years to come. So that's the only thing.
On that note, thank you very much, Sydney Mbhele. Thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous with your time. I deeply appreciate it. My voice has gone up a pitch now, you know, because I'm now in podcaster mode throughout the conversation. Because throughout the conversation, you know, it was very deep, and I think I enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you so much, Sydney.
No,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you
glad
too.
we finally made time to do this. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. My name is Eitayo Olayemi. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.